simple individual and showing all of this stuff to them so that anybody that's watching knows for a fact that it wasn't that individual's smarts or skills or anything that brought all this about. I mean, no one human being could possibly do all of this stuff. And the reason I believe it's real is because we have all of it on video and artifacts that, shall we say, are in safekeeping that people can see that prove the point.
Okay. We're going to take a break here, and I'm going to take a deep breath. This is exciting for me. I love listening about this, and I wish I had been able to stay up 3 days before we actually got you in here and studied all this story over and over again. But we're going to go to a break and come back, and we've got another, forever to go. Another hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
We'll get into some more. Ron, you were recently held hostage. It was all over the newspaper that you were a hostage over. Was it in Turkey?
Yes, it was.
And how'd that happen?
Well, there's some political problems in Turkey like there is in, almost any country in the world. We have been extremely blessed here in America that while there's some political differences, things have not gotten violent. I think we did see a display in Los Angeles that shows it can happen very quickly. But in Turkey, there's a group that would like to take a part of Turkey and turn it into their homeland or whatever. And these individuals are looking for publicity. And taking Western hostages is one of the means that they perceive to be effective in getting attention. And we were out there going to do some work on Noah's Ark, and these people, I am told by the Turkish security people, have sympathizers or cooperators that have access to the computers. For example, you go into any country, they put you on the computer as a tourist or whatever your status you are. In visiting their country, this helps them keep track of you, keep a record of what's going on. So we were there, and the word got around, and these people set up a roadblock and caught us and took us out in the mountains and, shall we say, wore me out. I'm 59 years old. I was 58 then, but a year doesn't make that much difference. And we were forced to travel through the mountains at the rate of speed that these young guerrillas could travel.
Now, did they hit you or do any physical abuse?
They didn't do any deliberate physical abuse. However, they, on one occasion, dug our grave, and there was a lot of psychological pressure on us. And I had an experience there. The Turkish military surrounded the position of these terrorists one night, and the next morning they challenged these people and told them to let us go and to drop their weapons and surrender. And the leader of the terrorist group said, if you don't go away, we're going to kill the tourists now. And they lined up in front of us, and they were going to kill us if there had been one shot fired down below. And I was, I figured that was it. One of the terrorists that was standing in front of me had tears running down his face, and he was a tough kid. So I thought, if he was that convinced, that probably there wasn't that much time left. So I said a little prayer, as Christians always should do, and just say, Lord, whatever you want that'll have a better effect on your work and stuff is fine by me. And, I said, but if it's your will, I'd like to survive this experience. Well, the text that came to mind was, be thou faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. I'd much rather the one about the angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him and delivereth them came to mind, but it didn't. Yeah. And so anyway, there was a peace there. Okay. God says he'll take care of your children, and he'll do all of this. And so anyway, these people simply wanted attention. And what they were planning to do was take us down to northern Iraq and kill us one at a time. When the publicity died down from one death, then they would kill another one and get more publicity and then kill another one. And the State Department had written us off. We have copies of the interdepartmental communications, and they had written us off. They had word from their sources that we were not going to be released, we were not going to survive. And as it worked out, while they were transferring us to Iraq, northern Iraq, I had the opportunity to overpower the driver of the vehicle, spin the car out on the shoulder of the road, and got us out of the situation. But
well, you are Indiana Jones after all, or Tennessee Ron, or Tennessee WYATT.
Yeah. Anyway,
well,
there comes a time when if you don't do something, you know, the end is obvious. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to sit idly by and let nasty things happen, you know, to myself or to other people.
No.
And so this is what it was all about. They were seeking publicity, and they got a great deal. As you said, it was all over, you know, the newspapers and TV and everything.
You have some clips here. I want to get back into some of this that you have found. You have discovered what you believe is the right crossing of the Red Sea. Is
yes,
that right?
ma'am.
And we want to run some of that clip here for a minute. And will you tell us what we're looking at as we do this? The map that we're seeing there, the crossing is just to, what, almost center screen, isn't it?
It is, yes. This is a satellite map, and those things are wonderful when it comes to figuring out the terrain and the route of the Exodus. They can also tell where a lot of people have traveled because it compresses the ground, and even though wind blows the sand around, you can still note these on and so this is the canyon that Moses led, and I'll use a term here that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it's the Habiru. And this is a collection of Semitic slaves that were in Egypt for a number of years. They were enslaved by the founder of the 18th dynasty, which is Thutmose I. And anyway, God destroyed the Egyptians, as you are familiar with, at the crossing site. This is the beach they came out on. To the near side, towards us, there's a large Egyptian fortress that has been there all the way back to that point in time and before. So they...
How big is that? Is that big enough to hold Israel?
It is. There's about 7,000 to 8,000 acres. There.
Okay.
And
so
anyway,
that could hold 4 million people that
easily
came out in the Exodus. Now, what are we seeing here?
Well, we're looking down towards the south. Josephus, those that like to check references on these things, in his Antiquities of the Jews tells about this, and they went down towards the south, but some mountains come right out into the water and cut off any movement in that direction.
And that's what he talked about, was the mountain coming down to the water.
He did. And then Pharaoh came out and just sealed them off between the mountains and the sea and the Egyptian army. Now this is a Phoenician-style column set up by King Solomon. There's an inscription on the one on the opposite shore in Saudi Arabia that says that this is where God opened the sea and drowned Mizraim, which was their term for Egypt, and delivered the Israelites and the mixed multitude.
Okay.
I believe this
is an underwater. I believe you said this was
right
human.
To the top left of the screen is a human rib cage, and there's some other bones there, like the cervical vertebrae of the spine and the back of the skull that are visible in this photograph. And our little lionfish is there to show people that this is not a gimmick. This was 80 feet under the water. Now, this shows a chariot wheel at about 80 feet, about the same depth.
Are there many
underwater.
of these out there?
There are there's approximately 20,000 chariots that got wiped out in this experience. So the bottom is littered with the chariots' parts and people's remains and horses' skeletons, and we've collected a couple of horses' hoofs from out there. I was rather surprised that they survived, but they did.
I guess the Lord could make them survive if He wanted to have you find them years
yes.
later. And I remember one of the first things that I saw was an underwater. Somebody had an underwater film of this and swimming through, and you could see these artifacts, and it just dropped me in my tracks to
yes.
see these chariots under there. Do they recognize it over there now?
Yes, the Director of Antiquities, I took one of the chariot hubs in to have it identified and to discuss how we should proceed with this. And the gentleman, Nasif Muhammad Hassan, looked at it. He said, that's 18th Dynasty chariot.
Okay, is this the right time?
It is. Now, he had me at a disadvantage. At that point in time, I was unaware that the only time in Egyptian history that they experimented with 8-spoke chariot wheels was during the 18th Dynasty. And this was an 8-spoke chariot wheel. So to him, it was very simple to identify it. To me, I thought, well, he didn't take a very close look at that. I'm inclined to, really look things over and poke at them and whatnot, make sure what they are. But he didn't have to, because he was aware of something I was unaware of at that point in time.
Okay. Talk to me about this crossing. Whoever decided where the crossing was? I mean, the traditional site that they think where they really crossed.
Susan Constantine's mother, she's known as Saint Helena. At that point in time, she was known as Empress Helena. Went to the Holy Land, spent roughly 6 months, and she just went around and said, this is where this happened, and that's where that happened, and they built little shrines in all these areas. Now, the lady was supposed to claim to have been divinely guided, but in archaeological research since that time, there has not been one single site that she pointed out that has any physical remains, and there's good evidence that none of them are accurate.
Okay.
But the traditional Mount Sinai, St. Katerina, or Jebel Musa in the Sinai Peninsula, indicated that the crossing was at the Gulf of Suez or up by the Bittern Lakes. Now, the Bible talks about the Yam Suf, in the Hebrew there, which means Sea of Reeds. That's one of the translations of it. Well, at this crossing site over on the Gulf of Aqaba, there is a tremendous amount of vegetation at this area. In fact, the bottom is so covered with reeds, underwater reeds and stuff, except for, say, December and January, that it's very difficult to do much research other than during those 2 months. Okay. So anyway, God has allowed people to think other places were the sites and preserve these, like I mentioned a minute ago, for a time when He can show the whole world where it actually is. And, people are pack rats. If we'd have known where all these things were all these years, there'd have been nothing left for us
they would
today.
have taken it home, stuck it in a glass case.
Right.
We're going to take a break right here. I want to come back and talk about where they went when they crossed through the Red Sea.
Okay.
And they actually were going to Mount Sinai.
Yes.
And